In the crucible of human suffering lies the potential for profound transformation. What appears as the darkest lead of our experience holds within it the potential to become the purest gold of wisdom. If only we understand the ancient formula for this sacred transmutation. What if the most devastating moments of your life weren't simply wounds to be endured, but rather the prima materia, the first matter of a profound alchemical transformation? What if those ancient alchemists, hunched over their crucibles in candlelit laboratories, weren't merely attempting to turn lead into gold, but were encoding a timeless formula for transforming the very substance of human suffering into spiritual gold? The scrolls of antiquity whisper a truth that modern psychology is only beginning to rediscover. Trauma, that which breaks us open, contains within its very structure the blueprint for our reconstruction, but not merely a return to what was, rather an evolution into something far greater. Close your eyes for a moment. Visualize the most painful experience that still lives within you, that still breathes and moves through your thoughts, your body, your dreams. Now imagine that this experience isn't merely a wound, it is the beginning of an alchemical process. A process that the ancient Hermetic tradition described through three sacred phases: the nigredo, the blackening, the albedo, the whitening, and finally the rubedo, the reddening. This isn't metaphor. This isn't poetry. This is the hidden science of soul transformation that has been preserved in secret societies for millennia, because it offers the most profound solution to the fragmentation of consciousness that plagues modern humanity. You who have found your way to this teaching know that you are not here by accident. The soul recognizes truth before the mind can name it. And something in you already knows what I am about to reveal. I extend to you an invitation to journey through the mystical laboratory of your own consciousness, to understand how the prima materia of your unprocessed trauma, that chaotic, painful substance that seems to have no value, contains within it the seed of your greatest awakening. The path I'm inviting you to walk is ancient. It predates our modern therapeutic approaches by thousands of years. Yet it contains wisdom that our most cutting-edge trauma researchers are only now beginning to validate scientifically. From the sacred temples of Egypt to the medieval alchemical laboratories of Europe, this knowledge has been preserved by those who understood that human suffering is not merely a condition to be cured, but a sacred process to be honored and transmuted. You are both the alchemist and the prima materia. You are the laboratory and the experiment. And through the wisdom I'll share with you today, you will come to understand the Hermetic formula that allows you to transform the leaden weight of your trauma into the psychological gold of wisdom, resilience, and expanded consciousness. This journey will not be easy. The alchemists were clear. Transformation requires heat, pressure, dissolution. Just as gold must be subjected to intense fire to separate it from base metals, so too must our wounded psyches undergo a process of calculated dissolution before reconstruction. But I promise you this: when you understand the alchemical stages of trauma transformation, when you learn to work with, rather than against, this natural process, what once felt like your greatest burden will be revealed as your most profound teacher. In the next 30 minutes, we will explore the Hermetic principles that govern all transformation, including the healing of psychological trauma. We'll decode the ancient wisdom that reveals how the phases of alchemy, nigredo, albedo, and rubedo, perfectly mirror the journey of trauma recovery. You will discover how the principle of correspondence, as above, so below, as below, so above, reveals the patterns that connect cosmic transformation to your personal healing journey. You'll understand why the principle of rhythm explains both the cycling of your traumatic symptoms and the pathway to their resolution. I will share with you the hidden connection between the alchemical stage of nigredo, the blackening that the medieval alchemists called the dark night of the soul, and what modern psychologists call trauma's impact on the psyche. You'll see how the unconscious dissociation that protects you from overwhelming pain is the same process the alchemists called the death phase that must precede rebirth. We'll explore how the albedo, the whitening or purification stage parallels modern trauma therapies like EMDR and somatic experiencing, which help to process and integrate traumatic memories. And finally, how the rubedo, the reddening that signifies the union of opposites, mirrors the post-traumatic growth and wisdom that can emerge when trauma is fully integrated. This ancient yet timeless knowledge provides not just understanding, but a practical framework for your healing journey, concrete practices that bridge esoteric wisdom with modern psychological insight. The knowledge I'm about to share finds its roots in the Hermetic tradition, attributed to the legendary figure Hermes Trismegistus, thrice greatest Hermes, said to hold the wisdom of three traditions: Egyptian, Greek, and later Arabian. These teachings were preserved in the famous Emerald Tablet, which begins with the principle of correspondence. That which is above is like that which is below, and that which is below is like that which is above. This principle reveals the fractal nature of transformation, that the same patterns of change occur at all levels of existence, from cosmic to atomic to psychological. The alchemists, those mysterious practitioners of transformation, understood that the same processes they observed in their laboratories were mirrored in the human soul. By the medieval period, alchemy had evolved into a sophisticated system with clear stages of transformation. At its core were three primary phases that would become the foundation of all alchemical work: the nigredo, albedo, and rubedo. The nigredo, the blackening, was described as putrefaction or decomposition. The alchemists believed that all ingredients had to be broken down, cleansed, and cooked extensively to a uniform black matter before any transformation could begin. This stage was symbolized by the raven, representing death and dissolution. The albedo, the whitening, followed the nigredo. It represented purification and was often symbolized by the dove. This was the stage where the prima materia, having been thoroughly dissolved, began to reconstitute itself in a purified form. What makes this ancient wisdom so remarkable is how perfectly it parallels our modern understanding of trauma and recovery. The medieval alchemist working with physical substances was unknowingly mapping the very process by which the wounded psyche heals itself. The first profound revelation lies in understanding how the alchemical stage of nigredo describes the initial impact of trauma with uncanny precision. When we experience overwhelming events that exceed our capacity to process them emotionally, our psyche enters a state remarkably similar to what the alchemists called the blackening. Psychological trauma creates what modern therapists call dissociation, a protective disconnection from overwhelming emotions. The traumatized person often describes feeling dead inside, emotionally numb, or separated from themselves. This is precisely what Carl Jung recognized when he compared the black work of the alchemists with the critical involvement experienced by the ego as it confronts its shadow. The nigredo represents a psychological death, not of the self, but of our previous understanding of ourselves and the world. When trauma strikes, our fundamental assumptions about safety, meaning, and self-worth often collapse. As one trauma survivor described it, it was as if the person I'd been died that day, and I've been trying to figure out who survived ever since. This collapse of meaning is what alchemists called the massa confusa, the chaotic mass that precedes any true transformation. Modern trauma psychology confirms this, noting that trauma often produces cognitive errors, excessive guilt, or distorted perceptions of self and the world. The initial impact of trauma creates exactly the kind of psychological decomposition that the alchemists symbolized in the nigredo. But here is where the wisdom of alchemy offers what modern psychology sometimes misses. This blackening is not a mistake. It is not merely damage to be repaired. It is the necessary first stage of a profound transformation. Just as the alchemist knew that the prima materia must be broken down completely before it could be reconstituted in a higher form, the traumatized psyche must undergo a dissolution of old structures before new, more resilient ones can emerge. As the alchemical texts state, "No one reaches the dawn without passing through the night." The nigredo, though painful beyond measure, contains within it the seed of rebirth. If we have the courage to work with it rather than merely trying to escape it, penetrating deeper into the mystery of trauma transformation, we encounter the alchemical principle of polarity. Everything has its pair of opposites. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. This principle reveals one of the most counterintuitive truths about trauma. Within your deepest wound lies your greatest potential for healing. Consider this paradox. The very mechanisms that create trauma symptoms, the unconscious fragmentation of experience, the protective dissociation, the hypervigilance, were originally survival adaptations. Your psyche, in its profound wisdom, created these responses not to harm you, but to preserve you when faced with overwhelming experience. The alchemists would have recognized this as the principle of polarity at work. The same force, expressed at different degrees, manifests as both poison and medicine. Your trauma responses aren't failures of your psyche. They're evidence of its remarkable capacity to protect you, even at great cost. This understanding transforms how we approach trauma healing. Rather than seeing trauma responses as pathology to be eliminated, the alchemical perspective honors them as manifestations of the psyche's inherent drive towards wholeness, misapplied perhaps, but sacred in origin. In the alchemical tradition, the transition from nigredo to albedo, from blackness to whiteness, was not achieved by fighting against the darkness, but by finding the hidden light within it. This mirrors contemporary trauma approaches like internal family systems therapy, which recognizes that even our most troubling trauma responses were originally protective parts trying to help us survive. The deeper mystery is this. Trauma creates a division within the psyche, a separation between the wounded part and the whole self. This division is what the alchemists symbolized as the separation of elements that must occur before they can be recombined in a higher form. In alchemical terms, solve et coagula, dissolve and recombine, was the formula for transformation. Modern trauma therapy follows this exact formula, helping survivors to dissolve the frozen, fragmented trauma experience so it can be recombined with the wholeness of the self. This is the albedo stage, the whitening that follows the blackness, where purification and integration begin. Now we arrive at the practical application of this ancient wisdom. How to consciously engage with the alchemical process of trauma transformation in your daily life. The journey begins with recognition. Acknowledging the prima materia of your unprocessed trauma. This requires cultivating what alchemists called the philosopher's eyes, the capacity to see value in what appears worthless or painful. In practical terms, this means developing a compassionate, curious relationship with your trauma responses rather than judging or fighting against them. The first practical technique, cosmologies, draws from both alchemical tradition and somatic experiencing therapy. Learning to detect and track bodily sensations associated with trauma. The alchemists understood that transformation must occur at the level of matter, the physical, not merely an abstract thought. Similarly, trauma healing requires engaging with the body, where trauma energy is stored. Begin by gently bringing awareness to sensations in your body associated with traumatic activation. Tightness, trembling, numbness. Like an alchemist observing changes in the crucible, simply witness these sensations without trying to change them. This witnessing presence is what begins the transformation from unconscious reaction to conscious response. The second practice involves what alchemists called separation, the conscious differentiation between the essence of who you are and the traumatic experience you've endured. This parallels the therapeutic technique of creating a dual awareness learning to acknowledge trauma while simultaneously recognizing that you are more than your trauma. Try this practice. When trauma responses arise, internally state, I notice this feeling/memory/reaction, and I'm the awareness that can observe it. This creates the alchemical vessel, the contained space in which transformation can occur. The third technique draws from the alchemical understanding of conjunction, the bringing together of separated elements in a new relationship. In trauma healing, this means reconnecting with dissociated parts of yourself through practices like inner child work. When triggered, visualize approaching your wounded inner part with the compassion and wisdom of your adult self, creating a dialogue between these aspects that begins their integration. Finally, embody the principle of rhythm. Everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. Trauma healing is not linear but cyclical, moving through periods of processing and integration, challenge and rest. Honor these natural rhythms rather than forcing constant progress. These practices aren't merely psychological techniques. They're modern applications of the ancient alchemical operations through which the prima materia of trauma is gradually transformed into the gold of wisdom. As we approach the culmination of the alchemical process, the rubedo or reddening, we discover the most profound truth about trauma transformation. Properly alchemized, trauma doesn't merely return us to our previous state, but elevates us to a higher level of consciousness and connection. The rubedo stage in alchemy represented the union of opposites, the integration of the conscious and unconscious, spirit and matter. In trauma healing, this manifests as what psychologists now call post-traumatic growth, the profound positive changes that can emerge from the struggle with highly challenging life circumstances. This isn't mere resilience or recovery, it's transformation. The person who completes this alchemical journey doesn't simply heal their wounds. They transmute them into gifts of wisdom, compassion, and purpose that serve not only themselves, but the collective. Carl Jung recognized this when he wrote that an experience of the self is always a defeat for the ego. The rubedo stage requires surrendering our limited identity, the self defined by trauma, and opening to a more expansive sense of who we are. This is why many trauma survivors report that their healing journey ultimately led them to spiritual awakening and a deeper sense of connection to all life. The Hermetic principle of mentalism. The all is mind. The universe is mental, reveals why this transformation extends beyond the individual. As we transform our individual consciousness through this alchemical process, we participate in the evolution of collective consciousness. Our personal healing contributes to the healing of our relationships, communities, and ultimately, our world. This is why many who complete this journey of trauma transformation discover a calling to serve others, to become guides and healers themselves. Having traversed the nigredo, albedo, and rubedo in their own lives, they become living embodiments of the philosopher's stone agents of transformation, capable of catalyzing healing in others. In this way, what began as personal suffering becomes transpersonal wisdom. The wound becomes a gateway. The trauma that once felt like your greatest burden reveals itself as your most profound initiation into the deeper mysteries of existence. As our journey together comes to completion, I extend to you a final invitation to recognize that the alchemical transformation of trauma is not merely a psychological process, but a spiritual initiation that has been recognized across cultures and throughout time. The Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, reminds us that your personal journey of transformation participates in a cosmic pattern of death and rebirth, dissolution and reconstitution that permeates all levels of existence. In transmuting your trauma, you align yourself with this universal rhythm, becoming not merely healed, but a conscious participant in the great work of evolution. Remember that the alchemists measured the nigredo phase, the darkest part of the journey, as lasting for 40 days and 40 nights. This is the same duration that Jesus spent in the desert, that Moses spent on the mountain, that the Buddha sat beneath the Bodhi tree. The universality of this time frame suggests that there is a natural rhythm to profound transformation and a necessary period of darkness before the dawn. If you find yourself in the nigredo phase now, in that dark night of despair where no light seems possible, know that you are not lost or broken. You are in a sacred process, one that countless others have traversed before you. The darkness is not a punishment, but a crucible, forging within you capacities for wisdom and compassion that can be gained in no other way. If you're in the albedo phase, beginning to see glimmers of light and integration, trust the process of purification. Allow the whitening to progress at its own pace, neither rushing nor resisting the natural rhythm of your healing. And if you're approaching the rubedo, feeling the fire of renewed purpose and the integration of your experiences into a larger meaning, prepare yourself to share the elixir of your transformation with a world desperately in need of authentic healing wisdom. Wherever you are in this process, know this: the trauma that once seemed to be your greatest curse contains within it the seeds of your greatest blessing, if you have the courage to engage with it alchemically rather than merely trying to escape it. In the words of the alchemists, visita interiora terrae, rectificando invenies occultum lapidem. Visit the interior of the earth, and by rectifying what you find there, you will discover the hidden stone. Your wounds, when approached with consciousness and compassion, reveal themselves as pathways to the philosopher's stone of your own awakened heart. May you walk this path with courage, with patience, and with the knowledge that you are participating in a sacred science of transformation as old as humanity itself and as new as this very moment of awakening. I am your guide on the journey beyond the veil. And until we meet again, may the alchemist within you recognize the prima materia of every challenge as the beginning of a golden transformation. Have you ever experienced a moment where time seemed to stand still, or perhaps felt an inexplicable déjà vu that whispered of realities beyond our conventional understanding? What if these weren't simply quirks of human perception, but glimpses through a veil that conceals the true nature of time itself? What if everything you understand about time is merely an illusion, a construct created by your limited perception? What if the ancient mystics who spoke of accessing Akashic records, seeing future events, or remembering past lives weren't delusional, but were experiencing a reality that modern quantum physicists are only now beginning to verify through rigorous experimentation? Welcome, fellow soul travelers, to another journey beyond the veil. Today we venture into perhaps the most profound mystery of human existence, the true nature of time itself. The barrier between ancient wisdom and quantum reality is about to dissolve before your eyes, revealing a universe where past, present, and future exist simultaneously, where your consciousness can move freely across what we once thought were immutable boundaries. In the next half hour, we'll explore how the cyclical time concepts of ancient traditions align precisely with cutting-edge physics. You'll discover experiments that have demonstrated retrocausality, where future events measurably influence the past. And, most importantly, you'll receive practical techniques to begin experiencing time beyond its linear constraints, potentially transforming how you relate to your past wounds, present limitations, and future possibilities. Are you prepared to step outside the prison of linear time? The journey begins now, To understand our exploration today, we must first recognize that linear time, the notion that time flows like an arrow strictly from past to future, is actually a relatively recent concept in human consciousness. For most of human history, across virtually every ancient civilization, time was understood to be cyclical in nature. The Hindu tradition speaks of yugas, vast cosmic ages that cycle through periods of enlightenment to ages of ignorance, each complete cycle lasting 4.32 billion years. As the search results reveal, this belief system suggests that the universe goes through cycles of creation and destruction, with each age representing a different level of moral and spiritual darkness. The ancient Egyptians encoded cyclical time in their worship of Osiris, whose death and resurrection represented the eternal cycle of cosmic regeneration. Greek philosophers like Plato and Aristotle taught that history repeats itself, as society is wrecked and rehabilitated any number of times. These weren't merely primitive attempts to understand time. They were sophisticated cosmological frameworks based on deep observation of natural cycles and insights accessed through altered states of consciousness. Mystics across traditions have spoken of the Akashic records described as an energetic library of information that contains the details of your soul and its journey. Helena Blavatsky introduced this concept to Western audiences, describing a non-physical repository containing all human experience across all times and spaces. Edgar Cayce, known as the Sleeping Prophet, reportedly accessed these records during trance states to retrieve information about past lives and historical events. Yet despite this rich heritage of temporal understanding, most of us today remain trapped in a rigid, linear conception of time. We see our past as fixed and unchangeable. We perceive our future as uncertain, yet somehow predetermined by our past actions. We experience ourselves as moving along a timeline, from birth to death, with each moment disappearing forever as it passes. This limited perception creates profound existential anxiety. We mourn the past we cannot change. We fear the future that rushes toward us. We struggle to be present because each moment seems to slip away into oblivion. This linear time trap is perhaps the greatest limitation on human consciousness. A prison we don't even recognize because its walls are invisible. But what if both ancient wisdom traditions and cutting-edge quantum physics are pointing to the same profound truth, that time is far more fluid, interconnected, and malleable than we've been conditioned to believe? In our exploration today, we'll journey through 4 revelatory dimensions of non-linear time. First, we'll dive deeper into ancient esoteric concepts of time-exploring cyclical cosmologies, the eternal return, and practices designed to transcend temporal boundaries. Next, we'll examine the quantum revolution in our understanding of time. From retrocausality experiments, where effects precede causes, to the block universe theory suggesting all moments exist simultaneously. Third, we'll explore the crucial role of consciousness in perceiving and potentially influencing time, revealing how meditation and other practices can alter your temporal experience. Finally, we'll integrate these understandings into practical techniques you can begin using immediately to experience time beyond its linear constraints, potentially transforming your relationship with past traumas, present limitations, and future possibilities. By the end of our journey, you may never experience time in quite the same way again. The veil between what was, what is, and what will be may become transparent to your awakened perception. Let us begin our deeper exploration with the ancient understanding of cyclical time. In the Vedic tradition, the universe moves through 4 great ages of yugas, from Satya Yuga, the golden age of truth, through progressively darker ages, ending with Kali Yuga, our current age of spiritual darkness, before the cycle begins anew. Cyclical time implies that people slowly evolve, then devolve, and then evolve again. These cycles of time are called yugas, or ages. What's remarkable about this cosmology is not just its vast time frame, but its recognition that consciousness evolves and devolves through predictable cycles. In the Golden Age, humans naturally perceive the underlying unity of existence. In our current age, we perceive separation and duality. Yet the cycle ensures we will eventually return to unity consciousness. Beyond cyclical time, ancient traditions recognized what we might call vertical time, the notion that all moments exist simultaneously in a higher dimension. The Akashic records, derived from the Sanskrit word akasha, meaning the fifth element or cosmic space in Hinduism and Buddhism, represent this understanding. In the context of the Akashic records, the term akasha is extended to refer to a metaphysical library or database that contains the energetic imprints of all thoughts, emotions, events, and experiences throughout time. Friedrich Nietzsche's concept of eternal return challenges us to consider time's recurring nature. This philosophical idea suggests we should calibrate our actions carefully, making their consequences bearable, livable with in a hypothetical perpetuity. It represents an ultimate embrace of responsibility for our choices, recognizing their eternal significance beyond linear progression. Perhaps most profound is the mystical recognition across traditions of the eternal now, the understanding that past, present, and future are mental constructs, and that the only reality is the present moment, which contains all time within it. What if time was cyclical? It would change the way you look at everything. Indeed, this fundamental shift in temporal perception has been the gateway to enlightenment for countless spiritual adepts. Through contemplative practices, ritual or sacred plant medicines, practitioners of ancient traditions claim to transcend linear time, accessing past lives, perceiving future events, or experiencing the eternal present where all times coexist. Now let us turn to the laboratories of modern physics, where experiments with quantum particles are revealing a picture of reality that would have astounded even Einstein, yet might have seemed familiar to ancient mystics. In the quantum realm, our fundamental assumptions about time break down in startling ways. One of the most remarkable phenomena is retrocausality, where effects can precede their causes, and future choices appear to influence past events. Retrocausality, or backwards causation, is a concept of cause and effect in which an effect precedes its cause in time. In experiments called delayed choice quantum eraser tests, scientists have demonstrated that the choice to measure a particle in the present appears to determine its behavior in the past. This isn't merely a quirk of measurement. It suggests that at the quantum level, time may not flow exclusively from past to future. As physicist John Wheeler proposed, this indicates a participatory universe where consciousness plays a role in creating reality. Some physicists have embraced retrocausality because it can potentially resolve some long-standing puzzles in quantum physics, particularly as an alternative explanation to the spooky action at a distance that troubled Einstein. Research by physicist Darrell Bem at Cornell University found evidence that future events can affect participants' responses in the present. Similarly, heart rate experiments conducted by Antonella Vanini showed physiological responses occurring before random stimuli were selected by computers. The retrocausal effect was clear when analyzing data within each subject, demonstrating that our bodies may react to future stimuli before they occur. The implications are profound. If retrocausality is allowed, then the famous Bell tests can be interpreted as evidence for retrocausality and not for action at a distance. This suggests our understanding of causality itself may be incomplete. Equally revolutionary is the block universe theory, supported by Einstein's special relativity. This theory suggests that past, present, and future all exist simultaneously in a four-dimensional block of space-time. What we perceive as the now is merely a slice of this larger reality, like a single frame in an already completed film. A variation called the growing block universe theory suggests that the past and present both exist, while the future does not yet exist. The present is where new moments are continually added to the block of reality. This aligns remarkably well with ancient Egyptian and Hindu cosmologies about the unfolding of time. What these scientific findings collectively suggest is that our conventional understanding of time as a one-way arrow from past to future may be fundamentally incomplete. At deeper levels of reality, time appears to be non-linear, interconnected, and potentially malleable to consciousness itself. The meeting point between ancient wisdom and quantum physics lies in the role of consciousness in perceiving and potentially influencing time. This is where our exploration becomes not just theoretical, but deeply personal. Studies on meditation and time perception have shown that mindfulness practices can significantly alter how we experience time. Research published in Psychological Science demonstrated that mindfulness meditation exercises increased sensitivity to time and lengthened perceived time. As practitioners develop their meditation skills, the sensitivity to time increases when the level of anxiety decreases, suggesting our mental state directly impacts our temporal perception. But consciousness may do more than simply perceive time differently. It may actually participate in creating our temporal experience. The observer effect in quantum physics suggests that consciousness plays a role in collapsing probability waves into concrete reality. If this is true, then our awareness may be intimately involved in determining not just our present experience, but potentially our past and future as well. This brings us to the radical possibility that ancient mystical practices for transcending time weren't delusional, but were sophisticated technologies for shifting consciousness to different temporal perspectives. When a shaman reports traveling to the past or future, when a yogi recalls past lives, when a prophet foresees events yet to come, these experiences may represent consciousness moving outside the constraints of linear time perception. Consider the practice of timeline jumping meditation, described as a process that allows you to meet a version of yourself that is experiencing the reality you desire. This practice is based on the belief that we live in infinite timelines, with infinite versions of ourselves available, and that reality reflects those versions back to us. Far from mere visualization, this technique suggests consciousness can jump between different temporal expressions of self. The implication is profound. If consciousness can move through time in non-linear ways, then perhaps our sense of being trapped in linear progression is simply a limitation we can transcend through the right practices and understanding. We now arrive at a remarkable convergence, a meeting point where ancient wisdom traditions and quantum physics tell the same story about time's true nature. Both suggest that linear time is not absolute, but relative to the observer. Both indicate that past, present, and future are more interconnected than our ordinary perception allows. Both point to consciousness as a factor that can transcend and potentially influence temporal reality. The ancient concept of Maya, the veil of illusion that obscures ultimate reality, finds its parallel in quantum physics' revelation that the solid sequential world we perceive is underlaid by a fluid reality of probabilities and interconnections. The mystical experience of the eternal now aligns with Einstein's insight that the separation of past, present, and future is a stubbornly persistent illusion. What we're witnessing isn't science validating spirituality or spirituality anticipating science, but rather two methods of inquiry, one subjective, one objective, arriving at complementary understandings of a reality that transcends ordinary perception. having explored the theoretical foundations of nonlinear time. From both ancient wisdom and modern physics perspectives, let us now turn to practical applications, ways you can begin to experience time beyond its linear constraints. The space-time perspective shift. Our first practice is a thought experiment designed to shift your conceptual understanding of time, a necessary first step before experiential practices can take root. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine you're looking at a map of your entire life, from birth to death, spread out before you like a landscape. Every moment of your existence is there simultaneously: your first steps, your graduation, this very moment watching this video, and moments yet to come. From this perspective, you aren't moving through time. You're observing all of time at once, just as all locations in space exist simultaneously, regardless of where you stand. All moments in time exist simultaneously, regardless of which moment your consciousness happens to be experiencing. Now imagine zooming out further, seeing not just your timeline, but the timelines of everyone you know, all interconnecting in a vast web of causality and meaning. Zoom out further still to see all human timelines, all Earth timelines, all cosmic timelines, the entire block of space-time existing as a unified whole. In this perspective, nothing is ever truly lost. The past isn't gone. It's just in a different location in space-time that you're not currently observing. The future isn't unreal. It's just in a location you haven't yet experienced. Take a moment to really feel this perspective shift. How does it change your relationship to past events that troubled you? How does it affect your anxiety about the future? How does it transform your experience of this present moment? This perspective shift alone can be profoundly liberating, helping you recognize that your consciousness is not confined to a single point moving along a timeline, but has the potential to experience reality from a much broader perspective. The Eternal Now meditation. Our second practice is a meditation technique for experiencing what mystics call the eternal now, the reality that exists when we step outside of mental time. Find a comfortable position and gently close your eyes. Begin by bringing your full attention to this present moment. Feel the weight of your body, the rhythm of your breath, the ambient sounds around you. Now, as you inhale, silently say to yourself, "This moment." And as you exhale, say, "Is all moments." Continue this for several breaths, synchronizing the phrases with your breathing. With each breath, allow your awareness to expand beyond the confines of sequential thinking. Notice how thoughts about past and future are themselves occurring in the present moment. Every memory, every anticipation, all are experiences happening now. Now, shift your attention to the space between thoughts, the pure awareness that remains when mental time stops. In this space, there is no past, no future, only presence. This is the eternal now that mystics speak of, the timeless dimension that underlies all temporal experience. Rest in this spaciousness, allowing all sensations, thoughts, and perceptions to arise and pass within it, while maintaining awareness of the unchanging presence that contains them all. Research confirms that mindfulness meditation exercises increased sensitivity to time and lengthened perceived time, especially among experienced practitioners. With regular practice, this meditation can help you develop the ability to step outside linear time perception at will, accessing a state of consciousness where time's grip loosens and a more expansive reality becomes apparent. Timeline jumping exercise. Our third practice draws from both quantum concepts of multiple probabilities and esoteric practices of connecting with other versions of yourself across time. Begin by identifying a future state of being you wish to experience, perhaps a version of yourself who has transcended a current limitation, developed a desired quality, or achieved an important goal. Close your eyes and imagine this future self as vividly as possible. How do they look, move, and speak? What energy do they radiate? What knowledge and wisdom have they gained? Now imagine that this isn't just a potential future self, but an actual version of you existing in a parallel timeline that your consciousness can connect with. Visualize a bridge of light extending from your heart to theirs, creating a channel through which information and energy can flow. Ask this future self what they most want to share with you. What was the key insight or decision that helped them become who they are? What would they want you to know right now? Then, imagine stepping fully into their embodiment, experiencing reality from their perspective. With their knowledge, their emotional resilience, their expanded awareness. Feel the qualities of this future self integrating into your present awareness. These qualities aren't just possibilities. They're aspects of yourself that already exist in another temporal reality and are now becoming accessible in your current experience. This practice aligns with the concept that timeline jumping meditation lets you feel and actually be the version of yourself who's experiencing what you want. It's about tapping into any one of these infinite experiences that are possible, tapping into the ones that you are choosing. Retrocausal healing. Our final practice explores the possibility suggested by retrocausality experiments that present consciousness can influence past experiences. This practice isn't about changing historical events themselves, but rather transforming your relationship to them and potentially affecting how they live in your present awareness. Think of a past event that still carries emotional charge for you, something that created pain, regret, or limitation in your life. Rather than seeing this event as fixed and unchangeable, we'll work with it as a fluid reality that your present consciousness can interact with. Close your eyes and visualize this past event as if it's happening on a screen before you. See all the details, including your past self experiencing the event. Now imagine your current self with all your present wisdom, compassion, and understanding entering the scene. You're not there to change what happened, but to bring a new consciousness to the experience. Send waves of compassionate awareness to your past self. Let them know they're not alone. Share the perspective and understanding you've gained since that moment. Perhaps there's something your past self needed to hear or feel that you can provide now from your more expanded awareness. Then, imagine the energy of that past event transforming, not changing what happened, but changing how the experience resonates across your timeline. See the event becoming a source of wisdom and growth rather than limitation and pain. As you complete this practice, notice how your current experience of that memory has shifted. The historical facts haven't changed, but your relationship to them, and potentially their energetic impact on your life, may have transformed significantly. This practice recognizes that while we may not control external events, our consciousness can move through time in ways that bring healing and integration to our temporal experience. The convergence of ancient wisdom and quantum understanding points to a reality where time is not the rigid master we've believed it to be, but a flexible dimension that consciousness can learn to navigate more freely. When you begin to experience this truth directly, the walls of your temporal prison begin to dissolve. Past traumas no longer appear as fixed, unchangeable realities, but as fluid experiences that your expanded awareness can reintegrate and heal. Future anxieties lose their grip as you recognize that the future isn't predetermined, but exists as a field of probabilities that your consciousness participates in creating. And the present moment reveals itself not as a fleeting instant between past and future, but as a portal to the eternal now that contains all time within it. As physicist John Wheeler proposed, we may indeed live in a participatory universe where consciousness plays a fundamental role in creating reality across time and space. The experiments demonstrating retrocausality suggest that the future influences the past in measurable ways. opening possibilities for how our present awareness might interact with other points in our timeline. As we conclude our journey beyond the veil of time, remember that what we've explored today isn't merely theoretical. It's an invitation to a profound shift in consciousness that can transform how you experience your existence. I invite you to continue this exploration beyond today's journey. Begin with the practices we've shared, experimenting with them daily to develop your capacity for non-linear time perception. Notice how even small shifts in your relationship with time can create profound changes in your experience of life. In our next journey beyond the veil, we'll explore the quantum nature of consciousness itself, revealing how your awareness extends far beyond the confines of your physical brain. Until then, remember that you are not merely a being in time. You are a consciousness that transcends it. Share your experiences with these practices in the comments below. What insights have you gained? What shifts have you noticed? Join our community of temporal explorers as we continue to push the boundaries of conventional reality together. Thank you for journeying with me beyond the veil. Until next time, may you dwell in the eternal now. Before diving into this profound exploration of sacred sound, I want to share a single revealing truth. What you hear in this moment is only a fraction of the cosmic symphony that has been playing since the dawn of time. The sounds that shape our reality, both heard and unheard, carry within them the very codes of creation that ancient masters understood as the primary language of the universe. Have you ever wondered why certain sounds can instantly transport you to another time and place? Why can a simple melody bring tears to your eyes, or why the resonance of a temple bell seems to vibrate not just in your ears, but in the depths of your very being? What if I told you that sound isn't merely something you hear, but rather something you are? That at your deepest level, you exist as a complex arrangement of vibrations, a living harmony seeking resonance with a greater symphony of existence. The ancient Egyptians knew this. The Pythagorean mystery schools understood this. The Vedic sages encoded this wisdom into their most sacred texts. And today, after millennia of this knowledge being hidden, suppressed, or simply forgotten, modern science is rediscovering what the ancients always knew. Sound shapes reality at its most fundamental level. Dear seeker, this is not just another video about sound healing. This is an invitation to journey beyond the veil of ordinary perception, to explore how the vibrational architecture of creation has been understood and utilized by initiates across time and culture. I invite you, not as a passive viewer, but as a fellow traveler on this path of remembrance. Your soul has known these truths before. Perhaps that's why you're here now, drawn by frequencies beyond conscious awareness. Called to reclaim this wisdom that belongs to all who seek to understand the deeper harmonies of existence. Today we'll explore temples, where priests and priestesses used specific vowel sounds to restore divine harmony within the human body. We'll decode the mathematical mysteries that Pythagoras discovered when he realized that numbers themselves were the hidden language of reality's song. And we'll venture into the science of how specific frequencies can literally reshape matter, alter consciousness, and heal the body's energetic pathways. Are you ready to listen with more than just your ears? To feel these ancient teachings resonating within the chambers of your heart? To remember what your soul has always known about the sacred power of sound? In the next half hour, we will traverse magnificent terrain, both ancient and futuristic, outer and inner, scientific and spiritual. Here's what lies ahead on our journey. First, we'll explore how the hierophants of Egypt discovered the healing power of vowel sounds, using a practice called toning to manipulate vibration as medicine for body and soul. Then, we'll decode Pythagoras' revolutionary discovery that all of reality could be understood through harmonic ratios, revealing why he taught that the universe sings and how his followers believed that every celestial body creates its own unique tone in the cosmic symphony. We'll venture into the sacred science of Sanskrit mantras, where specific sound frequencies were precisely mapped to energy centers within the human body, creating a technological system of transformation that predates our modern understanding by thousands of years. As we bridge ancient wisdom with modern discoveries, we'll explore the fascinating science of cymatics. How sound literally shapes physical reality into geometric patterns that mirror the very mandalas and yantra designs found in spiritual traditions across the world. Finally, you'll experience practical demonstrations of how to use your own voice as an instrument of healing and transformation, learning specific toning techniques that ancient mystery schools reserved only for their most dedicated initiates. This is not merely information to be consumed, but wisdom to be embodied, vibrations to be experienced. The ancients understood that true knowledge must resonate within, not simply be understood intellectually. The story begins where many great mysteries originate, in ancient Egypt, along the life-giving banks of the Nile. Around 5,000 years ago, while most of humanity was still developing basic civilization, the Egyptians had already established an extraordinary understanding of sound as medicine. In their temples, specially trained priests and priestesses were masters of what we might call vibrational healing. They understood that when the human body becomes ill, it has fallen out of its natural harmonic resonance. Disease was not seen merely as a physical ailment, but as a musical problem, a dissonance in the symphony of the individual. Using a method called toning, these Egyptian sound healers manipulated vowel sounds through precise control of breath and voice to produce therapeutic vibrations. They knew something modern science is only now rediscovering, that specific frequencies could restore harmony to the body's energy centers. Acoustics scientist John Stuart Reid has conducted fascinating research in Egyptian temples, discovering that their architecture itself was designed to amplify and channel specific healing frequencies. When you create a particular sound in these sacred spaces, he found that one particular frequency will leap back at you, what modern science calls the prime resonant frequency. But this wasn't unique to Egypt. Across the Mediterranean, another profound tradition of sound wisdom was emerging through the work of Pythagoras in the 6th century BCE. While today he's primarily remembered for a simple theorem about triangles, his true legacy was far more profound. Pythagoras discovered that the entire universe could be understood through musical ratios. The story tells that while passing a blacksmith's forge, he noticed how hammers of different weights produced different tones when striking the anvil. This led to his revolutionary experiments with the monochord, a single-stringed instrument that revealed the mathematical relationships underlying all harmonious sounds. By manipulating string tension in simple ratios, 2, 1, 3, 2, 4, 3, he discovered the octave, the fifth, and the fourth, the fundamental intervals that would form the basis of Western music for millennia to come. But for Pythagoras, this wasn't just music theory. It was cosmic revelation. These same ratios, he believed, governed the distances between planets, the seasons, colors, and even human emotions. Meanwhile, in ancient India, a parallel tradition was developing around the science of sacred sound. Sanskrit, perhaps the oldest language based on pure sound and vibration, encoded profound vibrational wisdom in its very structure. Each Sanskrit syllable was understood not merely as a symbolic representation, but as an actual vibrational force that could affect consciousness and matter. The primordial sound, Om, AUM, with its frequency of 7.83 Hz, was understood as the fundamental vibration of the cosmos itself, the same frequency that modern science has identified as the Schumann resonance, the electromagnetic pulse of our planet. What's remarkable is how these diverse traditions, separated by vast distances and without modern communication, arrived at strikingly similar conclusions. That sound is not just something we perceive, but a fundamental creative and healing force in the universe. The first great revelation these ancient sound masters share with us is that sound precedes form. In virtually every spiritual tradition, creation begins with sound. The word, the logos, the primordial vibration that manifests all things. In Egyptian cosmology, the god Thoth, Hermes to the Greeks, created the world through the power of his voice. In Vedic tradition, the universe emerges from the cosmic sound, Om. In the biblical tradition, in the beginning was the Word. These aren't merely poetic metaphors, they're describing a profound understanding of vibrational reality that modern physics is now confirming. Cymatics, the study of visible sound vibration, provides a striking demonstration of this principle. When sand particles or water are placed on a plate that is vibrated with sound, they don't arrange randomly. Instead, they form geometric patterns of remarkable complexity and beauty patterns that change as the frequency changes. What's astonishing is that these patterns often resemble the sacred geometry found in mandalas, yantras, and temple architecture across cultures. The flower of life, the Sri Yantra, the seed of life. These sacred patterns may actually be visual representations of specific sound frequencies that the ancients could perceive directly. The Pythagoreans took this understanding further, developing what they called the music of the spheres, the concept that celestial bodies, through their movements and relationships, create a cosmic harmony. While inaudible to ordinary human ears, Pythagoreans believed this celestial music could be perceived by the soul once it had been properly purified through mathematical and musical training. The Pythagoreans believed that everything which existed had a voice and that all creatures were eternally singing the praise of the Creator, writes one scholar of their tradition. Man fails to hear these divine melodies because his soul is enmeshed in the illusion of material existence. This leads us to the revelation that sound isn't just something external that we hear. It's the fundamental nature of reality itself, including our own being. We don't just perceive vibration. We are vibration in human form. As we venture deeper into this mystery, we discover that the ancient understanding of sound wasn't just philosophical, it was technological. These traditions developed precise techniques for using sound to alter consciousness, heal the body, and even influence physical reality. The Egyptian priests knew that specific vowel sounds, when properly intoned, could activate and balance the body's 7 primary energy centers. Edgar Cayce, while in trance states, spoke of these Egyptian practices, describing how priests used 7 distinct vowel sounds to energize and harmonize what we now call the chakra system. This knowledge wasn't shared freely. In the Pythagorean mystery schools, students underwent years of silence before being initiated into the deeper teachings about sound. Why such secrecy? Because they understood that sound carries power that could heal or harm depending on how it was used. The deeper mystery reveals itself in what modern science calls brainwave entertainment. Our brains naturally synchronize with external rhythmic stimuli, including sound. Different frequency ranges correspond to different states of consciousness. Delta waves, 0.5 to 4 Hz, correspond to deep sleep and healing. Theta waves, 4 to 8 Hz, to meditation and creativity. Alpha waves, 8 to 14 Hz, to relaxed awareness. Beta waves, 14 to 30 Hz, to active thinking. Gamma waves, 30 to 100 Hz, to heightened perception and spiritual experiences. The ancients knew that by producing specific sound frequencies, they could induce particular states of consciousness. This wasn't mysticism, it was applied neuroscience. thousands of years before we had the technology to measure brain waves. Consider the Sanskrit seed mantras or bij mantras associated with each chakra. Modern measurements have found these sounds vibrate at specific frequencies. Lam, root chakra, 256 Hz VM, sacral chakra, 288 Hz RAM, solar plexus, 320 Hz YAM, heart chakra, 341.3 Hz HAM, throat chakra, 384 Hz OM, third eye, 426.7 Hz. Consider the Sanskrit seed mantras or bij mantras associated with each chakra. Modern measurements have found these sounds vibrate at specific frequencies. Lam, root chakra, 256 Hz VM, sacral chakra, 288 Hz RAM, solar plexus, 320 Hz YAM, heart chakra, 341.3 Hz HAM, throat chakra, 384 Hz OM, third eye, 426.7 Hz. These aren't arbitrary assignments. These specific frequencies resonate with the actual vibrational qualities of these energy centers within the human energy field. But how did ancient yogis determine these precise frequencies without modern measuring equipment? This points to their profound capacity for direct perception of vibrational reality, an ability that most modern humans have lost. The deeper mystery is that these ancient sound technologies weren't just theoretical, they were practical tools for transformation. Pythagoras discovered that the 7 musical modes of the Greek system had specific emotional and psychological effects. He once encountered a young man driven to violence by jealousy, further agitated by a musician playing in the stirring Phrygian mode. Pythagoras asked the musician to switch to the slow, rhythmic spondaic mode, immediately calming the youth and preventing violence. This understanding extended to healing as well. In both Egyptian and Greek traditions, specific musical modes were prescribed for different ailments. It wasn't simply about making patients feel better emotionally. They understood that specific frequencies could restore proper function to organs and systems within the body. Let us now bridge this ancient wisdom with practical application. How can we integrate these profound teachings into our modern lives? How can you, watching this now, begin to work with sound as the ancients did? The simplest and most powerful tool is your own voice. Vocal toning. The sustained expression of vowel sounds requires no special equipment, can be practiced anywhere, and carries the unique energetic signature of your own being. Here's a simple practice drawn from these ancient traditions. First, find a quiet space where you can be undisturbed. Sit comfortably with your spine straight, allowing the breath to flow naturally. As you inhale, feel the breath filling not just your lungs, but your entire being. As you exhale, allow a single vowel sound to emerge naturally. Start with the sound AH, as in father, the most open vowel sound. This vibration resonates with the heart center, creating an expansive quality that can dissolve tension and open emotional blockages. Allow the sound to sustain for the entire length of your exhale, noticing where you feel the vibration in your body. Try this now. Take a deep breath, and as you exhale, intone ah. Feel how the vibration fills your chest cavity, how it seems to radiate outward from your heart center. Now, let's practice a sequence of vowel sounds associated with different energy centers, moving from the base of the spine upward. For the root chakra, intone the sound UH, as in cup, feeling the vibration at the base of the spine. The Sanskrit seed mantra here is Lam, pronounced Lum. For the sacral chakra, intone U, as in you, feeling the vibration in the lower abdomen. The Sanskrit seed mantra is VAM. For the solar plexus, intone OH, as in go, feeling the vibration in the upper abdomen. The Sanskrit seed mantra is Ram. For the heart center, intone AH, as in father, feeling the vibration in the chest. The Sanskrit seed mantra is YAM. For the throat center, intone I, as in light, feeling the vibration in the throat. The Sanskrit seed mantra is HAM. For the third eye center, intone I, as in day, feeling the vibration in the forehead. The Sanskrit seed mantra is OM. For the crown center, intone E, as in sea, feeling the vibration at the top of the head. This connects to the highest frequencies of consciousness. Practice each sound for 3-5 minutes, observing how the quality of your awareness shifts with each vibration. This isn't just about making sounds, it's about becoming attuned to the subtle vibrations within your own energetic system. Another practical application comes from the Pythagorean tradition of musical harmony. Pythagoras identified specific musical intervals that produce particularly powerful effects on consciousness. The octave 2:1 ratio creates a sense of wholeness and completion. The fifth 3:2 ratio generates a feeling of expansion and growth. The fourth 4:3 ratio promotes stability and grounding. Modern sound healers have created music based on these harmonic principles, often using the frequency of 432 Hz as a reference point rather than the standard modern tuning of 440 Hz. Many believe that 432 Hz resonates more harmoniously with the natural frequencies of the human body and the earth itself. You can integrate this wisdom by seeking out music composed according to these ancient harmonic principles for meditation, relaxation, and healing purposes. Or more simply, become more conscious of the sounds you surround yourself with, recognizing that every sound you hear is literally shaping your physical and energetic body. As we expand our understanding beyond the practical applications, a transcendent perspective emerges, one that reconnects us with the cosmic dimensions of sound. What the ancient traditions understood, and what quantum physics now confirms, is that at the most fundamental level, reality is vibration. Everything from subatomic particles to galaxies exists as waveforms of varying frequencies. The solid world we perceive is an illusion created by our limited senses interpreting these vibrations. The Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, finds perfect expression in the science of sound. The same mathematical ratios that create harmony in music appear throughout nature in the spirals of galaxies. The arrangement of leaves on a stem, the proportions of the human body. This isn't coincidence. It's evidence of a unified vibrational field that structures all of creation according to harmonic principles. The ancient Egyptians, Pythagoreans, and Vedic sages weren't just developing techniques for personal healing or transformation. They were cultivating a way of perceiving and participating in the harmonic structure of the cosmos itself. When Pythagoras spoke of the music of the spheres, he wasn't being poetic. He was describing his direct perception of how planetary movements create vibrational patterns that influence all life on Earth. The Pythagoreans believed that once the human soul was liberated from the bondage of the lower world with its sense limitations, the music of the spheres would again be audible as it was in the Golden Age. This perspective transcends the individual focus of much modern sound healing. It reminds us that our personal harmony is inseparable from universal harmony. When we work with sound for healing or spiritual development, we're not just affecting our individual energy field. We're participating in the greater symphony of cosmic evolution. As one ancient text puts it, harmony recognizes harmony. And when the human soul regains its true estate, it will not only hear the celestial choir, but also join with it in an everlasting anthem of praise to that eternal good controlling the infinite number of parts and conditions of being. This transcendent perspective invites us to move beyond seeing sound healing as just another wellness technique. Instead, it becomes a path of remembrance, reconnecting us with our place in the cosmic symphony and awakening the dormant capacity to perceive and create through vibration as the ancients once did. As our journey through the hidden cosmology of sound draws to a close, I invite you to listen, not just with your ears, but with your entire being, to the symphony that has been playing since the beginning of time. The same creative vibration that sets the stars in motion continues to pulse through your veins, resonate in the chambers of your heart, and whisper through every cell of your body. The ancient hierophants of Egypt understood that sound was the bridge between worlds, between the seen and unseen, between matter and spirit, between human and divine. The Pythagorean initiates knew that numbers were not abstract concepts, but living vibrations that structured reality itself. The Vedic sages encoded in Sanskrit mantras, the very frequencies that could awaken the dormant potentials of human consciousness. And now, this wisdom returns to us, not as esoteric theory, but as living practice. In an age when humanity has separated itself from the natural harmonies of the earth and cosmos, these ancient sound technologies offer a path of reconnection and remembrance. I invite you to become more conscious of the soundscape of your life, to recognize how every sound you hear and every sound you make is literally shaping your reality at the most fundamental level. Begin to speak, sing, and tone with awareness of the creative power carried by your voice. Listen for the subtler harmonies beneath the noise of modern life. Perhaps most importantly, I invite you to reclaim your birthright as a vibrational being capable of direct communion with the cosmic symphony. The ancient masters weren't superhuman. They simply cultivated capacities that remain dormant in most modern humans. Capacities that you can reawaken through dedicated practice with sound. As you continue your journey beyond this video, remember the ancient Egyptian understanding that the renewed harmony and rhythm of the human body, emotions, and mind is the foundation of all healing and spiritual evolution. Remember the Pythagorean teaching that harmony recognizes harmony, and that the path to wisdom lies in aligning your personal vibration with the greater harmonies of the cosmos. The cosmic invitation is this: become an instrument through which the music of the spheres can play once again in this world. Allow your life to become a living expression of that primordial harmony from which all creation emerges. As your awareness expands beyond the limitations of ordinary perception, you'll discover that you've always been part of this eternal symphony, and that your unique tone is essential to its perfect expression. The ancients left us not just techniques, but a vision of humanity living in conscious resonance with the harmonies of creation. In reclaiming this forgotten science of sacred sound, we take a vital step toward realizing that vision once again. The vibration that created the cosmos continues to resonate through you in this very moment. Listen, remember, and allow yourself to become one with the eternal song